Welcome to the webinar. So here's today's agenda. You'll see this navigation pane, a number of times throughout the course of the presentation so we can track our progress. First, to talk about what is NCTCOG and what is its role in the environment. It is a voluntary association of more than 200 local governments and other entities, such as school districts, special districts, and transportation agencies. We provide regional planning assistance to the North Central Texas region for the Transportation Department. That's the 12 more urban counties in this map. Environment and Development Department serves 4 additional counties. Transportation's role in the environment falls under its goals that include preserving and enhancing the natural environment, encouraging sustainable communities, and reducing costs associated with constructing the transportation system. Environment and Development promotes a number of strategic initiatives, and those include natural resources, watershed management, and development excellence, among others. So next, we're going to talk about our first tool. That's the Permitti Responsible Mitigation Database. So first, let's provide a little background information about what Permitti Responsible Mitigation is and what compensatory mitigation is in general. This is a little bit of a complex subject, and I'll only be able to touch on it at a high level, given the amount of time and the number of tools we're talking about today. I would encourage you to sign on to our Permitti Responsible Mitigation Database tool to learn more about this. But Section 404 of the Clean Water Act authorizes the Corps of Engineers Regulatory Division to regulate the discharge of dredge or fill materials into waters of the U.S. So those include wetlands and streams. And generally speaking, compensation for impacts to wetlands and streams are mitigated by purchasing credits from an existing mitigation bank. But sometimes those credits aren't available in the area of the impact, and an alternative is needed. In this case, the permit applicant, which is the entity having the impact on the waters of the U.S., can seek out a property and improve the wetlands or streams as appropriate on that property and take the steps as approved by the Corps of Engineers. And this process is known as Permitti Responsible Mitigation. There are a number of parties involved in Permitti Responsible Mitigation, so that would include the willing landowner, and this is someone who has wetlands or streams on their properties that they would like to have improved, that need some restoration, or and they just simply don't have the means to do that, or they're looking for a partner to do that. The permit applicant is the entity having the impact, as we said before. If you think about that photo on the prior screen with the bridge being built over the river, maybe they're having to put some columns into the river that create a dredge and fill impact that they need to mitigate for. Another party is the third-party land trust. So this organization would hold a conservation easement for the area where the improvement was made in terms of the wetland or the stream. They may also play a role in some of the maintenance of the property. And last, but certainly not least, is the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers Regulatory Division, which must be consulted throughout this process and must give permission for Permitti Responsible Mitigation to take place. And for this tool, we're talking about the Fort Worth district of the Corps of Engineers. That is the area that our tool covers. So next, a little bit about the Permitti Responsible Mitigation Database that was created by COG's Transportation and Environment and Development Departments. It is our matchmaking tool that seeks to link those willing landowners with permit applicants, as long as they are in appropriate mitigation locations, kind of as illustrated in that map on the lower left. Mitigation needs to occur per the Corps of Engineers in an area that has some compatibility based on watershed, ecosystem, and river basin. Finally, The tool covers the area compatible with the Corps of Engineers Fort Worth District. So that's the map in the middle there. That is much of the state of Texas. So we're going to do a demonstration of the tool, and I'm going to go ahead and minimize my presentation here and switch over to the internet. So you can see that I am logged in here. This tool does require users to create a sign-in. The reason for that is that there's some addresses and information about properties in the tool, and we don't want just anybody to stumble upon that on the internet. We want only folks making a conscious effort to come to the site to be able to see that information. When you first log on, you'll see this screen for My Listings, and we're going to go ahead. The first thing it does is ask you to add a property. I have not added my property. I don't think that when the rain pools in my front yard, that actually counts as a wetland. So it's not here. But let's start with this panel on the left. Your first option is Edit Profile, where you can add your name and your contact information. And if we scroll down, you have the opportunity to change your password. My Properties takes you back where you were. If you had entered a property or a project, it would be visible here. If we want to add a property, and here this would be for a landowner, that's either a public or a private landowner can use this. You would enter the location, and then you drop a pin on the map. The map will zoom to the address that you enter. So we'll go ahead and go to the Council of Government Offices. We'll go zoom in a little bit more. We'll drop a pin right there on our blue basketball court. And then we can add some information about our property. And the reason we're asking for this information is it will help a permit applicant make a match to a property that they think is compatible for their mitigation needs. So that's why we ask for information about neighboring land use. And we also ask for information about the stream or wetland that you're hoping will be restored on your property. There's some technical terminology here that we then try and define in some non-expert terminology so that everyone can understand what we mean. And then some additional information about stream function. And then some information if you have a wetland on your property, that's where you'd provide some more detail. And you do have the option of adding photos. Now, none of these are required fields, so you can just add what you know and what you're comfortable adding. If we backtrack a little bit, if we were a permit applicant, we would go ahead to add project. And a really pretty similar process here. You could drop your pin on the map in the same way that we just discussed. And add your contact information. And folks will be able to see the contact information that you share here. That's how they'll reach out to you. And you're able to provide some information about your mitigation needs, like the linear feet that you expect to be impacting in a stream or the acreage of a wetland. Again, you can add a photo if you like. And finally, our last option here is exploring connections. So this takes us to our map. And this helps us see compatible areas for mitigation. So I had said earlier that the compatibility of the location depends on watershed, ecosystem, and river basin. It gets a little complicated. So our tool helps demonstrate that for you in kind of a color scheme, the green, yellow, and red that we're so familiar with traffic signals. Your green watershed here would be the one that would have a 1-to-1 ratio for mitigation. If you're familiar with that concept from mitigation banking, yellow would be the next most preferred watershed to conduct mitigation. Red would be the third most preferred location for conducting mitigation. Anything outside the green, yellow, and red would be outside an appropriate area. And again, there's a lot more information about this on the website itself. We're just kind of touching on this pretty quickly. So next, let's go to this menu bar across the top of the screen. And if we go to the home page, we'll see a little bit of background information about the database. And how it works in terms of connecting landowners and permit applicants. Here's our map again that we could click on this and see the relevant mitigation areas that are known as areas of applicable use, the coverage area, some information about permittee responsible mitigation. We could also zoom down to this spot by clicking here. We could scroll down further or click on glossary. Most of this glossary comes from the Corps of Engineers Rivets website, which is a website we link here. You can go there to learn about which mitigation banks serve your area and what credits they have available. But we wanted to supply these glossary terms because they're relevant to permittee responsible mitigation. And finally, we could scroll or click on links to take you to some really important links. Some of these are Corps of Engineers links. One that is very important here is the pre-application meeting request form. That's probably the first thing you would want to do if you wanted to engage in PRM, is reach out to the Corps of Engineers. There are some additional links here about land trusts and conservation easements. So next, we'll go over to the View Properties or View Projects and Properties drop down and view the map, which we've already demonstrated how it produces the color scheme on the areas of applicable use. But to scroll down further, since we're seeing those images there, those icons, here is our legend. The purple pin shows any land or any property that's been entered into the tool. The round red circle shows any potential mitigation needs in terms of a project that's been entered. And so far, we haven't had folks enter any projects or properties yet, but let me zoom in because we did add some demo properties here. And let's click here on this permit applicant demo entry. And so we see initially a little bit of information, but to see more, we click on View Project Details. And here you'll see all that information that we showed earlier that folks have added in about their property. And then to back out, we'll go back to our map. And we'll click on the purple pin. And here we get a little bit of information about our demo property that's been added. But if we want to learn more, again, we can now click on View Property Details and see all the information that had been added regarding the property, the land uses, the stream functions, etc. We've already seen the My Profile drop down. So finally, we do have a way for you to contact us if you have any questions or comments. So that ends our demonstration of the Permitti Responsible Mitigation Database. And let's go back to our presentation. So next up, we'll talk about the economic and environmental benefits of Stewardship Tool. So the economic and environmental benefits of Stewardship Tool is quite a mouthful, so we fondly refer to this tool as Eaves. And Eaves came about when, I guess it was about in 2016, a member of the Transportation Department's Policy Board kind of offered up this challenge. And he said that we look at environmental programs as the right thing to do, but we look at them as a cost. How do we measure the return on investment of this work? And so we were in turn given some funding to address that, but that challenge was all we were offered up in terms of guidance on this project. So we went ahead and developed some goals. We knew we wanted a very user-friendly online tool, and I think you'll find that it is. We wanted this tool to provide preliminary information for policy and decision-making. So it's just kind of a first step in terms of identifying whether green infrastructure would be a good solution for your problem. But we also wanted to make sure that it provided both qualitative and quantitative benefits of stewardship or green infrastructure. And we did want to engage some outside experts in this project. So we interviewed a number of stakeholders, and we also had a project review committee. The comments from the stakeholders tended to fall into 4 categories. Those include barriers to green infrastructure. Folks said that it was just hard to get people to change and do something new. They said we needed financial data to kind of prove that green infrastructure was a benefit and not just a cost, and that there was a need for public education. Folks said that the public, they like it when they see it, they just don't know why it's there, and if we can educate them, perhaps they can help influence decision makers to support green infrastructure. And finally, there was a need to include green infrastructure early in the planning phase in more of a holistic process rather than kind of late on a project by project basis. Additionally, our project review committee helped us kind of clear up some confusion about terminology that different agencies may have been using in different ways. They also helped us develop the underlying shape of the tool, what we call our concept map. And here, this is just kind of steps you through the tool at a very high level way. We actually have, 20, 30 plus concept maps that go through every possible type of infrastructure project that we include in the tool, and every kind of environmental data we include in the tool. But to step you through this concept map, we overlay an infrastructure project on a natural resource data layer, like say wetlands. We identify what possible environmental effects could occur, what types of green infrastructure could be used to reduce those effects, and we also think about the cost of implementing that green infrastructure. Then we identify what ecosystem services that green infrastructure could produce. And let's go ahead and define ecosystem service. So that is a benefit that people gain from the natural environment, such as the air we breathe, the water we drink, the shade from a tree. And so these ecosystem services can have quantified benefits, quantified financial benefits in some cases. So we wanted to identify those in addition to the qualitative benefits. So we needed some economic data as inputs to the tool. So we hired a consultant who was an environmental economist, and she produced this data paper that is available on the Eaves website. Just to give you a sampling of what's included in it, this is a table of costs of environmental impacts. So if we go to the first row and look at stormwater runoff, we can get the annual gallons of runoff per acre of added impervious area per year. And then we have her references below. So she did a lot of research for this paper. And another example here is she looked at the environmental benefits of stormwater management also now in dollars per acre impervious per year. So that's just kind of a preview if you want to dig a lot deeper into the data. Like I said, that paper is on the website. So let's go ahead and take a look at the tool. I'm going to minimize the presentation again. So this is where you first land when you go to the website, and we'll go ahead and go through this left-hand panel first. There is a user guide. I expect you may not need it, but it is there if you do. We do have case studies. These are examples across the U.S. where green infrastructure benefits have been quantified financially. We have some information on all the different green infrastructure types that are included in the tool. We have the consultant's data report that I just showed you a couple examples of, and then some information about the tool. But let's go ahead and get started, and let's evaluate a project. So again, we could zoom to an address, but let me go ahead and demonstrate some of these drawing tools up here. So I'm going to start with a line. So let's say we had transportation or some other linear infrastructure. And you double click to complete drawing your line. And many of these options here for the linear tool are roadway type projects. You do have the choice, though, of selecting other development because generally the tool is based on increasing impervious surface. So it does not have to be a transportation project. But let's say we have an existing roadway and we're going to add lanes to it. We can select that we're going to add 2 lanes, and this width here is estimated based on TxDOT design manual. We can identify whether the project will open up new areas for development. And let's say we're not happy with the estimated width. We can go ahead and change that. And then we would run analysis. But before we do that, let me backtrack and we'll go ahead and demonstrate another tool. So let's put that one in the trash can. And let's go ahead and we'll demonstrate the polygon tool. And we're going to create a new subdivision. Well, and let's say we're creating, actually, I think I just turned the map upside down, didn't I? Let's say we create a new subdivision here. And again, I double clicked to close my polygon. Here, I'll choose other development, and then some of these options, of course, go away. And I run my analysis. It'll slow down at about 85% because that's a very complex layer that it's analyzing, but it will complete the analysis. Okay, and there we go. So it provides us information about our environmental effect in a couple different ways. Here we can see it's quantified in acreage or linear feet. And then we also have information in a bar chart. And if you scroll over that, though, you'll get the same numbers. I want to bring your attention to this gold horizontal box here. Eaves is not a regulatory tool. It is a stewardship tool promoting the use of green infrastructure. So using the stewardship suggestions here on Eaves doesn't necessarily mean you will meet regulatory compliance. That's just important to note. So based on the environmental effects, Eaves then lets us know what our potential environmental effects are of our project, ranging from impacts on water quality to those on terrestrial habitat in this example. As we scroll down, we can see that then it tells us what stewardship options are appropriate for one or more of these environmental effects from above. And so we're going to count these really quick. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. So I want to demonstrate something else. First, if you want to learn more about water quality impact, you can click on the Learn More box, and this will pop up so you can go ahead and read that. But let's say we're really only concerned with water quality impact. and we decide to make that a priority, that will affect the stewardship options available for the project. So before we had 7 available, now it's streamlined those options down to 7 that are all available for water quality impacts, and it has removed the 2 that were not relevant. So let's say we were interested in a detention pond as a possible solution. We click on View Details. And first we get to the bar chart. And the source of the numbers here in the bar chart, again, is that data report that the consultant produced. And she found a range of numbers. So this bar chart represents both the low range and the high range of the numbers she was able to identify through her research. The pink bar is the estimated cost of installing 1 acre of a detention pond. We go with 1 acre because that is what the data supported. These numbers are not linear. The data is not linear, so you can't assume that you created a half-acre detention pond, that it would be half the cost and provide half the benefit. So again, this is just an early planning tool. We're also not saying that the impact you're creating should always be mitigated by 1 acre, or mitigation, not the right word, but should always be addressed with 1 acre of the stewardship. Again, this is just based on the data. But here you can see our smaller detention pond, or our low value for the detention pond, creates some stormwater and recreational benefits, and the other benefits are much smaller. Here, from another detention pond that we made a bigger investment in, we can also see additional benefits in terms of nitrogen and phosphorus, and a greater recreation value, which can depend on the design of the detention pond. If we continue scrolling down, there's some narrative that is supporting the information in the bar chart. Finally, if we've decided that we like detention ponds as our option and we want to provide this information to somebody else, we can compile our stewardship options, and this will generate a PDF. So this link appears. And then you can go ahead and print this out. And actually this, you know, we had highlighted water quality impact to prioritize that and streamline our green infrastructure solutions. But when we go ahead and create this PDF, it kind of removes that prioritization and provides us all of the relevant stewardship options. So we could go ahead and print that out. And that ends our demonstration of the Eaves tool. So let me go ahead and take us back to the presentation. So this takes us to our final tool. Let me check. So we're going to talk about our regional ecosystem framework and interactive viewer. The regional ecosystem framework we also refer to as the REF. A number of federal agencies worked with the Federal Highway Administration to develop this concept of ecological and ecosystem approach to developing infrastructure projects. And it called for mitigation and conservation, again, on a more holistic level, and not on the scale of a project by project basis, not on the scale of political boundaries, because as we all know, the natural environment does not follow political boundaries. NCTCOG received 2 grants over the years to work on the ecological project. The first grant allowed us to launch the regional ecosystem framework layers in 2011. So we're going to follow up with some poll questions, because right now we're thinking of revising our existing regional ecosystem framework, either the data, the methodology, and so we're hoping to get your input on how we might do that. So I want to describe our current methodology. Here on the left, we have what I believe is agricultural land. So this is a land use layer overlaid on a grid cell. And then this takes us to our blue table here that shows us how we scored that, depending on which percent of the grid cell was occupied by the agricultural land use. So you can see that if a relatively small amount, less than 20% was occupied, it got a score of 1. But if more than 50% of the grid cell was occupied by the agricultural land use, it got a score of 5. And then those were assigned different colors here. So the score of 1 here is represented by yellow and the score of 5 by the dark blue. So you can see then we've filled in, assigned scores to each individual grid cell. On the regional scale, there are those grid cell scores represented for the 12-county region. And then the regional ecosystem framework aggregates those up to the HUC 12 sub-watershed scale that you see illustrated on the right. The REF generated 10 layers that fall into the categories of green infrastructure, water considerations, and ecosystem value. And you say, but wait, agricultural land, is that green infrastructure? Because it does create some pretty significant environmental impacts. At the time, we were considering it as open space and a lack of impervious surface. So that is why that was placed in the green infrastructure category. So next, in addition to the regional ecosystem framework, we have its kind of partner interactive viewer. So that would be our third online tool. So in addition to those 10 layers of the REF, we have about 40 layers of additional environmental data with the goal of creating a one-stop shop for anyone who needs environmental data. So you could generate, images that look like this, where we have one of our REF layers overlaid with freshwater springs and watershed protection plans. So here is a link to that tool. But again, I'm going to go ahead and minimize the presentation and open up that final tool. Actually, I'm going to open up our REF web page that you'll see here. And from there, you can scroll down and click on this Launch Interactive Viewer. And you get the splash screen that lets you know that this tool is really for very preliminary planning purposes. And this will look similar to any GIS map that you've used in the past with a lot of similar options. For example, you could print your map and measure, and you could draw a potential project on the map. But let me click on the About button, because not all of the data with this tool is available spatially on the tool. We do have links to parcel data. Not all of our counties have parcel data as GIS downloads, but here we provide links to those who do. And if we scroll down, we can see that we also have a link to U.S. Fish and Wildlife's IPAC tool, which is relevant if you're interested in learning about threatened and endangered species, critical habitat, or migratory birds that may be in the vicinity of your project. Like a lot of these tools, you can type in an address and zoom to a specific location. Then let's go ahead and discuss, let's go back here to the middle and discuss these menu items here. If we click on what is the REF, it takes us back to that REF website where you can learn a lot more about the process. If we click on User Guide, as you might expect, it opens up a user guide. But if you want to be an advanced user of the tool, such as downloading data from tables and downloading the layers, I would encourage you to click on the REF Advanced User Guide that can help step you through that process. Next, we do have a data dictionary. And so this gives you the source and a description of all of the layers in the tool. And finally, there's an opportunity to leave feedback. This is actually a little tricky, so let me step you through this. Again, it takes us to our REF website, where we scroll down and we have a tab for contacts and additional resources. And so that provides our email addresses. Unfortunately, there's no way to go directly to that tab. Maybe we'll address this differently in the future. But this, to go back to our map, will demonstrate these options here on the top right. The legend, as you may expect, shows us what symbols are used for the layers that are currently displayed on the map. You can see that the map itself, or the interactive viewer, covers the 16 county region, but again, the regional ecosystem framework, because it was a transportation grant, only covers the 12 county layers. Let's jump over here to the right to the base map. You can replace this basic gray base map with some other options if you prefer. Some of them have some additional transportation options on there if you want to, if that helps you navigate. And finally, the layers themselves. I like to go ahead and start out by actually turning all the layers off. And we cover more than the natural environment in this tool. We also have examples like brownfields, and you'll say, but wait, nothing showed up on the map. And that would be because you can see this is grayed out. That's telling us that we need to zoom in farther before that will show up. You see that turned black, and now we can see our brownfields layer. We also have historical data, National Register properties. We have some archaeological layers from Texas Department of Transportation, county and city boundaries. I like to turn counties on because it really helps me navigate across the map. There are a lot of aquatic layers in here. So impaired waters, the watershed protection plans. They're showing up there in green. Again, if you wanted another way to look at the legend, you would click this triangle right next to the layer, and that will show you how we illustrate that layer. And the REF layers are in here too. So for example, let me highlight REF natural areas. So between the REF layers and the other data, we have about 50 layers total on this tool. Let me demonstrate some of the other options. Let me go back to let's see what this shows. We have these dots here on the right. We can click on these. We can view the data in an attribute table. And so this, I was saying you could use the advanced user guide to download that data. Another option here, let me go ahead and minimize this so I can see more of this box, is to show item details. And this will produce information similar to the data dictionary in terms of the source and date of the information. And that is the last of our demonstration of this tool. Let me go back to the presentation, but I think it's pretty close to complete, and we've got a little bit of time left.
We can take some questions if you want to put your questions into the chat box. We can try and answer some of those. And it looks like we've already got one. If PRMD is for Tarrant County, what do you recommend for Dallas, Denton, and Collin?
PRMD actually covers the entire Fort Worth district of the Corps of Engineers. So that is much of the state of Texas, and it includes Dallas, Denton, and Collin County, and many other counties. I think we had a question from the very beginning. Duncanville asked, are these tools applicable to smaller projects like a sub-acre sized ground mount solar array on residential, commercial, or brownfield location? So in terms of an impact, I can't remember what the Corps of Engineers threshold is to require impact or mitigation for impacts to wetlands, and it may be any impact. So if that is the case, then and you were required to do mitigation, then perhaps PRMD with Corps approval would be an option, and certainly green infrastructure could certainly be an option here with the Eaves tool. And you could use the REF interactive viewer very early in your process if you kind of wanted to pick a location that could create the least amount of impact, or if there was a certain type of environment you were particularly interested in locating your project. So as to this next question as to whether COG staff is available for an initial review of a site's potential applicability to the PRM database inclusion, no, we do not play a role in regulatory mitigation other than to try and create matches between landowners and permit applicants. So your go-to there would be the Corps of Engineers regulatory division. And you would go to that link we highlighted to set up a meeting with the Corps of Engineers. We also, on the next slide, have contact information. If you don't want to post in the chat box, you can, oops, one more. You can go ahead and reach out to us. If you have content questions about the tool, you can reach out to me. If you want to know how Brian did some of his amazing technical processes, you want to reach out to him. So I think that brings our webinar to a close. Thank you all.